Boyfriend forced me to choose between cutting off his brother, who saved me from his anger, or leaving him forever. Boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years. I have known his brother, who I will call Ray, for most of that time. We have always gotten on well enough. The whole situation started with my 21st birthday party. We had a party at home with 20 or so friends of family. Ray was of course present at the party, along with a few other members of BF's family. The party was going reasonably well. As it started to get later, I started to get a little tipsy, and most of the guests had started to go home. It eventually got down to a drunken little group made up of myself, boyfriend, Ray, and a couple of my girlfriends. We were sitting outside and one of my girlfriends decided to get on the trampoline. She managed to execute a pretty cool flip, and I expressed that I wished I knew how to do one. My friend talked me into giving it a try. I got up on the tramp, stumbled drunkenly and fell down laughing. Everyone else, except for BF, was laughing also. It didn't seem like much of an event until BF got up, muttered "fucking pathetic" in an angry tone, and then told me that we needed to speak in private. I was pretty confused as to what was going on, so I asked him why. He answered me with "just stop being a stupid cow for a second and come to the bedroom." Both of my friends and Ray looked pretty shocked at this, but before I followed BF to the bedroom, I told them it was fine and BF was probably just messing around. He can have a real temper sometimes, particularly after a few drinks, but I didn't think that would be the case in this instance, as literally nothing upsetting had happened. Cut to me and BF in the bedroom. He shuts the door and starts really going off. He tells me that I'm a disgusting drunk idiot and that I was showing off like some kind of pathetic wannabe by messing around on the trampoline, that I was an embarrassment to him and that I was to go to bed now and not leave the room until morning so that I would be more of an idiot in front of company. As this is going on, he is getting louder and louder and is slamming things around the room. I went to leave as I was quite upset at this point, but he blocks the door, so I sit down on the bed. Ray is banging on the door and tells BF to open in. BF goes out into the hall and I can hear he and Ray arguing. Next thing I know it, Ray comes into the room and says to go with him. I was sobbing like crazy at this point, because I hate confrontation in general, so I just nod and go with him. Ray makes sure my other friends have left and then we both get into a taxi. I don't know where BF has gone, but he is still in the house, so where? I'm crying a bunch in the car and don't say much, but Ray calls his and BF's mother and gives her a brief rundown of what happened. We got to Ray's place. He lives with a couple and they were all really nice. The girl roommate lent me some stuff to sleep in and Ray told me to take his bed and he would sleep on the couch. I was kind of all over the place but eventually got some sleep. Next morning I got up and had coffee with Ray and one of his roommates. Ray asked if BF had behaved that way before and I let him know about BF's temper, but explained that he had never blown up over something as insignificant as me mucking around on a trampoline. I asked Ray if he thought maybe I did or said something that might have upset BF and didn't realize due to being tipsy, but Ray said no, and that BF's behavior was unacceptable. I felt silly and embarrassed, especially knowing that R and my friends had heard everything BF had said, and I told Ray I had better get home and try to sort things out. Ray said that he wanted to stay at his place for just a bit longer to calm down, and that he would really rather prefer that I didn't go home straight away as BF could still be angry. I gave in and hung out there with Ray and his roommates. We all just played video games and got some takeout, and I ended up feeling much better afterwards, so I'm glad I stayed. Early evening I told Ray I should really go home. I didn't have any of my clothes and more importantly I needed my stuff for university the next day. He drove me over, but didn't really want me to go inside. I told him it would really be fine and promised I would call him if anything happened. He agreed but said he would wait outside for a few minutes just in case. I got inside and BF wasn't home, so I told Ray to go and went about tidying up from the party. BF eventually rocked up and seemed calm enough. I told him I thought we needed to have a talk and he agreed. We sat down on the couch and I explained to him that I didn't think the way he spoke to me last night and asked for an explanation. His response was, "I will discuss that with you after you delete Ray's phone number. You won't be speaking to him again." I was confused as all hell at this and asked what that had to do with the matter at hand. He told me that Ray disrespected him by interfering in our relationship, and that we were cutting ties with him. He told me he wouldn't discuss anything else about the night before until I did that. I told BF I thought that was pretty unnecessary, and that Ray had been trying to help me because BF was acting really threatening, and that I would have probably done the same in Ray's shoes. Well, BF did not like that. He yelled, called me some names and left the house. After a few hours he sent me a text, "I am sorry for yelling, but you need to respect what I want if you want the same in return. This can't be one-sided. Delete Ray's number and we will finish the conversation. Love you." I replied that I needed a little time to think and said I would be sleeping in the spare room when he got home and to please leave me some for a while. I went to bed, heard BF come in very late. He opened the door to the spare room and turned the light on, but as I woke up he just walked out of the room and slammed the door. So this morning I've woken up, BF is at work and I have a text from RAR. It says, "Hey, I hope you're okay. Look, what BF did the other night is really not alright and I think you should get out of there for a while. I've talked to. And it's totally fine for you to crash here until you figure out what you want to do, so that leaves me where I am now. Don't know what to do about the situation. Do as BF asks and cut contact with Ray, or take Ray's offer of some space away from BF to clear my head. My worry is that if I stay at Ray's that will destroy any chance of fixing things with BF. Advice very much appreciated. When I was able to come back and check on this post, I was amazed at the enormous amount of comments and messages I received. There has been a lot to catch up on and I am reading everything. Thank you to everyone who's given their advice. It has cemented the decision I've already made about getting out, but quite a bit has happened in the last day, so I will be doing an update for anyone who is curious. Update 1. I was amazed at the huge response I got, and while I couldn't reply to every comment, I did read all of them. After Ray texted me, I replied to him asking if he had known my BF to behave like this with other girls in the past. Over the course of many texts it came out that he often yelled at and belittled his previous girlfriend in front of others, and some of his friends and family had suspicions about how far he was taking it. After the breakup, the girlfriend posted some stuff on Facebook about how BF had hit her, said awful things to her and did other things like spying on her and deleting people from her phone behind her back. Initially when this happened, Ray and his parents questioned BF, but he insisted that the physical abuse accusations were not true and that his ex was saying those things to cover up the fact that she had allegedly cheated on him. BF admitted to yelling at her, but he told his family that she did the same and just as often. His family eventually accepted that, but Ray and his parents were always wary of BF's behavior, and Ray in particular had made a point to keep an eye on things. BF's ex apparently had also called Ray around 6 months after myself and BF had gotten together and asked him to help me if anything happened. At the time Ray was not quite ready to believe BF would physically abuse anyone, but he told her all the same that he would watch out for me or any other girl in the future. Ray told me that after the way he saw BF behave at my party, he became more convinced that BF was likely to get physical, and that was why he chose to step in. He also told me that even if it didn't go that far, I should not put up with how BF treated me. I agreed. What Ray had told me, and all the information and support I received here had me pretty convinced that I was not in a good situation. I decided to go and stay with Ray and his roommates for a short time. I don't have too many other options for accommodation this urgently. My parents live too far away and the few friends I could stay with are other girls with enough on their plate, and I didn't want to risk bringing this drama to their doorsteps. In retrospect, I'm glad I chose to go to Ray's, because I feel like what followed could have been even more frightening and dangerous if only myself and another girl had been present. I didn't have much time to get my stuff together before BF was due to arrive home, so I packed a few bags of essentials and valuables, along with my school things, and our pick-me-up. I left a note at the house for BF I was leaving and that I did not plan on returning, other than to retrieve the rest of my things. I didn't tell him where I would be staying and that I would rather he didn't contact me directly, suggesting he communicate through his mother instead. I got to Ray's and got settled in. While choosing to leave was difficult and I had a few bouts of crying, I also felt immensely relieved. Ray/BF's parents came around and brought some dinner. They were incredibly nice about everything and told me I had to do what was best for me. We always got along well, but I never expected them to be so kind and supportive given the situation. Halfway through dinner, my phone rang. It was BF. I did not want to answer it and everyone else agreed that was probably a good idea. After my phone rang out, Ray/BF's mom's phone began to ring. Predictably enough, it was BF calling. His dad answered the phone. The phone was not on speaker, but BF was loud enough that you could hear him yelling down the phone. I couldn't tell exactly what was said, but his dad was telling him to calm down, and not to do something. BF hung up on him, and Ray/BF's dad told us BF was coming to Ray's place, and saying this was all Ray's fault. Ray started to get a bunch of text messages from BF making threats and telling Ray that he knew I was there and Ha was coming to get me. Ray replied to him saying that if BF came here and caused trouble he would be calling the police, but BF ignored him. BF showed up at Ray's probably 15 minutes later. He drove up the lawn and almost hit the letterbox, and got out of his car and started yelling. Ray and his dad went out while I stayed in the front room with his mom. BF yelled for a while and was kicking at random parts of the garden. BF started to yell towards the house that he knew I was there and to come out. I wasn't planning on coming out at all and Ray told him to leave. BF ended up running around the side of the house to the back patio entry. The screen door was locked but the solid back door wasn't, and he started hitting the fly wire trying to break it. He kept yelling into the house that he knew I was there and that if I didn't come out, he would destroy all my stuff and log on to my school accounts and cause problems on there. Ray and his dad caught up to BF and started pulling him away from the door. BF started throwing punches and his mom and I both went out to the inside of the back door, because we were worried someone would get hurt. BF saw me and started trying for the back door again, and saying if I didn't get in the car he would kill himself. His mom said she was going to call the police. BF/Ray's dad ended up hauling him out to the front yard and told him to leave. BF did eventually get into the car. He spun his wheels and tore up the grass and drove off. I felt pretty awful after all that. His mom and dad were both visibly really upset and Ray's rental property had been messed up and I felt responsible. They were still so nice about everything though. They really are wonderful people. I spoke to the police and they said they would be speaking to BF about what happened, and I got some advice about obtaining a VRO and making sure I could find a way of retrieving my stuff from the house, so that is all okay for the moment. The latest news is that BF has been all over Facebook saying that Ray and I had been having an affair and posting all these random cropped blurry porn pictures from the internet saying it was us, and that he had caught us in the act. None of us are responding to any of it at this point, haven't really decided what to do there. My plan is to stay with Ray for now. It's still my best option and Ray has said he won't leave me alone at the house in case BF comes back. Either he or his male roommate would be there. We also spoke to a couple of the neighbors that Ray is friendly with, and they said they would keep an eye out for his car or call us if they saw anything dodgy. I'm at a bit of a loss as to what to do next. I'm planning to talk to my uni about getting into student housing. I'm planning to go out tomorrow to buy some pepper spray also. I'm tossing up about reaching out to BF's ex, but I'm not sure if it will cause more problems for everyone. So I suppose that's it, for now at least? Update 2. Everything moved really fast from there, and honestly I feel like my brain has only just caught up with my body. I barely slept that night, and when I did it was those hot little bursts where you wake up sure you've missed something and your chest is rattling. In the morning Ray made me toast I didn't touch, and his mum turned up at 9 with a folder and a big thermos and said we're going to the station and then we're going to court, love, like she'd already decided for all of us. I just nodded and went where I was pointed. The police were calmer than I expected. I gave a statement and they asked me to go through the threats and the smashing at the back door and the part about him saying he'd hurt himself. They asked if I had screenshots of the Facebook stuff, and Ray had already taken a bunch, so that got emailed off. A constable explained something called a police order and then a VRO, and by lunchtime they'd done the first one and told me he'd be served with it. Ray's dad texted to say he'd convinced BF to hand his keys in for the day and stay at their place, but I didn't trust that to stick. At the magistrate's court there was a duty lawyer who helped me word the interim order. I was shaking so much my signature looked like a heart monitor, but the magistrate granted it and read out the conditions, and there was a line about not contacting me and not posting anything about me online and staying a certain distance away from me and from Ray's place. I sat there gripping the arm of the chair and kept thinking about the trampoline, of all stupid things, and how I'd thought that moment was silly and small, and now here I was trying not to pass out in a courtroom. Ray's mom held my bag the whole time like she was guarding something precious. We went straight from court to my place because the police had said it was best to get the rest of my things while BF had the police order, and before he decided to make a scene again. An officer came with us and did the little knock and call into the place and then let me inside. It was awful seeing it all again. Everything felt greasy, like there was a film over the house. In the bedroom it was obvious he'd been through things. A bag of my cosmetics had been tipped out and there was bronzer ground into the rug, and my favorite jacket had a rip right up the sleeve like it had been cut. He'd pulled the sheets off our bed and just left the mattress. Weirdly, my laptop wasn't on the desk where I'd left it. I checked the drawer I keep my documents in, and my birth certificate and passport were there, and I swear I could have cried purely out of relief. The officer called BF while we were there and asked him about the laptop. He reckoned he didn't know and then suddenly remembered he might have put it away somewhere safe so she couldn't do anything stupid online. My stomach dropped. They told him to bring it to the station by the end of the day, and he tried to argue that I should come and get it off him in person. The officer just repeated it like a broken record and then said if it didn't turn up it'd be included in the report as stolen. I packed what I could into boxes and bags, and Ray kept asking what next and holding things up like, do you want this one? And I kept saying yes, no, I don't know, and feeling like someone else was piloting me from far away. When we walked out the front, there was a white envelope on the doormat with my name written on it in his handwriting. I didn't touch it. The officer opened it for me with gloves, and it was 4 pages of him scribbling about betrayal and me ruining his life, and you made me do this, the sort of thing that would have had me apologizing 6 months ago. I put it straight into the pile for evidence and felt cold and weirdly hollow instead of guilty. That felt like a small miracle. We got back to Ray's and I went straight into the shower and just stood there until the hot water was gone. When I came out, Ray was on the phone to his mom and I heard him say, yeah, she's got everything, yeah, that too, and it was so safe to overhear his voice doing the worrying for me that I nearly crumpled. An hour later his mom dropped by a cheap new phone. She'd gone into the shops and bought a SIM card for me and told me to start fresh with a different number, and I decided right then I was going to change everything. I sat at the kitchen table and did my email and the uni account first, then bank and everything else, and then I turned my old phone off and put it in a Ziploc bag in Ray's freezer because his roommate swore it was a thing to stop trackers pinging. It probably isn't, but it made me laugh for the first time in days and the sound surprised me. BF handed my laptop in at the station around 7 p.m. according to the constable who rang me. When I picked it up the next morning they gave it to me with a property sheet and a tiny look that said be careful. I took it to a tech place in the shopping center and asked them if they could wipe it completely because I was worried. The guy behind the counter asked if there was anything on it I needed, and when I said there were assignments and photos he did that sympathetic wince people do when they can't fix your problem exactly the way you want. He still found me most of my uni stuff on the cloud and then nuked the rest from orbit and installed fresh. I don't know if BF ever actually put anything on there, but I wasn't taking the chance. While I was waiting for it to be done I checked my new number and there was a message from an unknown that just said, "Is this my name?" And I nearly didn't reply. Turned out it was BF's ex. She said she'd seen the nonsense on Facebook the night before and wanted to check I was okay, but she didn't want to make things worse if I wasn't up for it. We met at a cafe that afternoon with Ray's mum sitting 2 tables away pretending to read a gardening magazine, and I felt 13 again and weirdly safe all at once. BF's ex is tiny and had this incredibly steady way of speaking, like she'd rehearsed being believed. She told me I wasn't imagining any of it, that he'd done the suicide threats with her too, and the guarding the door thing, the calling names in private and then getting nastiest when she tried to leave. She said she left when he put his hand around her throat during an argument, and she only told me that one part because I should understand that threats become actions sometimes and you don't get a warning label. I felt sick. She also asked if I had an iPhone, and when I said yes, she showed me how to check for shared locations and weird profiles and that sort of thing. I didn't have anything obvious. She said with her he'd used her iCloud to back up messages and that it had taken her months to realize. I changed that password again right there and then. Uni got back to me that night about emergency accommodation. I'd emailed the day before and they'd been wonderful, just straight away kind without me even having to spill everything. They said they had a studio in the residence they could move me into within a week earlier if someone else moved out sooner. The relief I felt reading that actually made me cry ugly on Ray's couch while his roommate pretended not to notice and kept playing his game with the volume turned down. Ray kept bringing me water like that was the answer to crying, and I kept drinking it like it was. BF's parents came around again after dinner and his mum's face told me before she even sat down that something had happened. BF had been served with the interim VRO and had a massive carry-on at their place about it. He'd posted more rubbish online, but his dad had finally got through to one of his mates and they took it all down and told him he was going to cop it if he kept it up. His dad looked so sad I wanted to hug him and then felt like that was probably weird. They told me they'd made an appointment for BF with a counselor and I said softly that I hoped he went for everybody's sake but that I was not going to be involved in any of that. For a second I thought his mum was going to cry, but she just squeezed my hand and told me I was doing the right thing and that it wasn't my job to fix her son. The next morning I woke up to Ray banging on my door because I'd somehow slept through 6 missed calls from an unknown number. I didn't ring it back. 10 minutes later Ray's phone rang and it was campus security. BF was outside the building where my lectures are, asking the admin desk if they'd seen me. He'd told them he needed to apologize but he was very agitated. My chest went cold and then hot. We rang the police and Ray told me to stay put with his roommate while he drove over because the station is closer to campus than here. Those 30 minutes were the longest of my life. I wasn't even supposed to be there that morning, but the idea of him wandering the corridors calling my name like a ghost made me want to vomit. Ray texted a photo from the car park when he got there and said stay at home, and then 10 minutes after that he texted they've got him. BF had hung around the front walkway long enough for the police to arrive and was still trying to argue that he needed just 5 minutes to talk to me because it would fix everything. They explained the VRO again, he argued. They reminded him that breaching it is an offense. He tried to point at Ray like this was all some conspiracy to steal me, and then they put him in the back of a car. I sat on the couch and felt very small and very old at the same time, and then I couldn't stop shaking and I think my body just went right, that's enough adrenaline for 1 week, and switched off. After that, it all has a strange slow breathing quality. The constable called me to tell me he'd been charged with breaching the order and released on bail with conditions, and that if he contacted me again I was to call them immediately, no matter what he said. I went to campus in the afternoon with Ray and checked in with the student support woman who said she'd flagged my file so that if anyone rang asking about me the staff were to say nothing and notify her. Walking through the courtyard I kept expecting him to step out from behind something and then had to tell myself over and over that my brain is allowed to be jumpy and that doesn't mean it's going to happen. We did a last run to the house with Ray's mum later that day to pick up a plant I'd forgotten of all things, and there was an apology note in different handwriting on the letterbox. It was from his dad, saying he'd mowed Ray's lawn and fixed the letterbox and he was sorry for the mess and to let him know if the landlord needed anything for the damage. I stood there looking at it like it was a piece of performance art about guilt and parenting, and then I cried again, but it was a soft good kind, this time. I told him I wasn't going to go after BF for the money for my jacket or for the garden or any of it because I don't want to drag this through every part of our lives forever. He said that was up to me, but if the landlord wanted repairs they'd cover them, and that he'd box up anything else of mine and drop it at Ray's when he could. Last night I went to see the student studio. It's small and kind of ugly in a perfect way. It smells like cheap carpet cleaner and there's a crack in the ceiling shaped like a river. There's a fat possum that looks in the bathroom window apparently, and the lady showing me around said he likes to check that everyone's brushing their teeth, and I laughed again, proper laughed. I signed the papers. Ray drove me back and didn't say that he was relieved, but I could feel it, and I was too. He told me he's going to come over on my first night with those stupid fairy lights everyone puts up, and I said that is contractually required of any studio, actually, and he grinned like a kid. Tonight I'm sitting at Ray's and it's quiet. We ate pasta that his roommate made out of 5 things because that's all he ever buys, and it was actually good. My new phone buzzed and it was an email from the court with the date for the VRO hearing. I messaged the duty lawyer asking if I needed to bring anything else, and she said the statements from Ray and his parents and the screenshots are good, and if BF keeps his nose out of trouble there won't be any more drama in between now and then. I put my old phone back in the freezer, which is now a running joke, and Ray asked for the 50th time if I'm okay to sleep, and I said yes, and for once I think I meant it. I don't know how to end this nicely. There's no neat bow and I don't suddenly feel like a movie person who learned a lesson and now glows. I am still tired and I still feel silly when I remember the stupidest parts, and I have a bruise on my arm from where I hit the bed frame shoving things into a bag and it looks like a thundercloud. But I think the worst of the panic has passed. I think I'm going to move my books into a tiny room with a possum for a neighbor and let my body keep learning that the door will open when I want it to open, and no one gets to block it ever again. Ray just walked past and said, "Do you want the last slice of garlic bread?" with his mouth full, and it was somehow the best sound in the world. I'll take that as a sign I'm heading in the right direction. Update 3. I moved into the studio on a Wednesday afternoon that felt like it had been pulled thin over a drum. Ray carried the heavy stuff and pretended not to notice I'd packed my shampoo like it was crown jewels. He brought the fairy lights like he'd promised, and we strung them around the worst crack in the ceiling so it looked intentional, like a river mapped in tiny cheap stars. The lady from Residences gave me a key on a stretchy wristband and said if anything felt weird at night to ring the after-hours number and they'd send security for a walk by. I was nodding at everything by then. Ray put a ridiculous cactus-shaped lamp on the bench that he swears came with the lights, which is not a thing that happens, and then he tidied the knives into their little holder like he was tucking them in. First night I slept in that hard new place way, stiff and skittery, waking every hour and checking the shadow of the possum in the bathroom window because apparently I like to imagine I'm in a nature documentary when I'm anxious. At 3 a.m. the pipes made the clang that every old building does, and I thought it was footsteps and sat up so fast my heart hit my throat. At 5 I gave up and boiled the horrible electric kettle and sat on the floor with a mug that tasted like plastic and tried to feel proud of seeing dawn from inside my own space. It didn't feel like pride, but it didn't feel like terror either, which I decided was a decent middle. The next morning I was measuring the bench with a piece of string to see if a tiny second-hand microwave would fit when my phone buzzed a noise I hadn't heard before, like it was chiming underwater, and the screen said an unknown air tag is moving with you. I didn't understand it at first. I googled while my hands did the thing where they don't belong to me, and then the same notification popped again with a little map showing a dot following mine. I almost laughed because I'd watched videos about these and thought that seems like something that would happen to someone who lives in a different headline. My hands got that wet shake, like after you've been in the cold and then come into a hot car. I rang Ray and said my phone has started tattling on plastic buttons and I'm not sure I'm in my body right now. He said I'm on my way, and told me to ring the residence number. Security came up first, a big guy with a soft voice who knocked like we were neighbors and asked can he look in my bags. We found it in the lining of my tote, the one I'd left at the house and grabbed the day we did the last run. It was taped into the seam under the pocket with a piece of gray tape and a hair stuck to it that wasn't mine. It made me feel suddenly like my own skin was a bag someone else had been rifling through. Security radioed the police and we stood around like people do after a car hits a pole and no one knows how to start the day again. When the officers came they were businesslike and careful. They put the air tag into an evidence bag and wrote the number down off the metal and took photos of the tape and the bag lining. They asked me when I'd last left the bag unattended and then apologized for asking a question that implies everything is my job. I told them I'd slept with my shoes on 2 nights ago, so that's about where my domestic control skills were at. In the corridor outside my door the RA from the floor was pretending to check the fire extinguisher, but really she was watching out for me and I nearly cried at her fluorescent vest. They asked me to come to the station to do another statement, and when we got there the same constable from last week met us and said this would be added to the file and that the serial could be matched to the Apple account it was registered under. He said a lot of people think those things are anonymous and that they're not. He used the phrase unlawful tracking, which made my head fizz. Ray's mum turned up as if she'd got a bat signal for paperwork, and she had a container of pasta and a notebook full of telephone numbers and dates I should remember, like I had borrowed her brain. They told me they'd be applying to vary the bail conditions to include no surveillance devices, and that if it came back to BF then we'd be talking about a separate charge under the Surveillance Devices Act. It was one of those moments where you don't cheer because the words are heavy, but some part of you sits up straighter. I went back to the studio and sat in the middle of the floor and ate the pasta out of the container cold because I didn't own a fork yet, and Ray later found me a plastic one in his car. The possum did a little scritch across the bathroom window and I said out loud, "Go on then, do your rounds," and the sound of my own voice in that space made it feel like mine. Everything compresses around court dates. The hearing for the VRO came up sooner than I expected, which somehow made me more nervous because I'd been mentally saving up all my courage for a later day. The waiting room had that courthouse smell of carpet cleaner and old paper. BF was there on the other side with a lawyer who had a briefcase like in TV and a face like he wanted to talk in a quiet banking voice. BF looked smaller somehow, and then in a blink he didn't, like the way a dog looks when it spots the wombat it's been pretending not to be interested in. He tried to tilt his head to see if I'd look, and the usher did that tiny don't shake at him without moving his feet. Ray sat next to me and breathed like he was lifting weights, and my leg bounced without permission, which would have annoyed me any other day. We went in and the magistrate said my name properly and read the papers. BF's lawyer said something about undertakings without admissions, and for a second it was quiet enough to hear the fluorescent tubes buzzing. The duty lawyer I'd spoken to before had told me I didn't have to agree to that, and I said I wanted the order. The magistrate asked me a couple of things and I answered without crying, which felt like a secret triumph I tucked into my pocket. They asked BF if he wanted to respond, and he did that politics voice where he said he was sorry for how things have been interpreted, and then something in his face flickered and he said she's been lying, and his lawyer put a hand on his arm. The magistrate granted the VRO for 2 years and added conditions about not posting online and not asking other people to contact me on his behalf in the distance around uni. I breathed out and forgot how to breathe back in for a second, and then my lungs remembered me. Afterwards, outside in the hallway, his mum looked at me and there was this terrible gentle apology in the way she didn't try to touch me. BF was trying to say something to his lawyer and to Ray at the same time, and it came out as a kind of urgent noise. The usher put himself like a bookend between us without having to be told. We left. On the footpath Ray asked if I wanted chips from the place around the corner because apparently salt solves everything, and I said yes because I didn't know what else my mouth could do. The thing about breathing room is that it expands. The stupid Facebook circus got quieter after the order was served, and then someone messaged me through my new email from the e-safety place saying they'd had the report from the police and that some of the posts were considered adult cyber abuse and they'd issued a takedown to the platform. I didn't quite understand the mechanics, but I understood that his accounts were suddenly either gone or scrubbed. A girl I vaguely knew from his friend group sent me a long message on my new number. I don't know how she got it, probably via someone from uni, that started with "I'm sorry," and ended with "I've unfollowed him and I feel late and stupid." And I sat with that for a bit because it's not my job to accept or reject anyone's guilt, but I messaged back that I hoped she was okay too and then put my phone face down like it was a thing that could leak. 2 days later, BF's dad rang Ray and asked if he could drop a box at my place because he'd found some of my things in a cupboard and he didn't want to keep them. He came with the box and left it with the RA because of the order, and then sent a text to Ray saying he was very sorry again about the lawn and the letterbox and that he'd spoken to their insurer about Ray's rental. In the box there were my old pajamas, a book I thought I'd lost, a little plant pot shaped like a hippo I got at a market, and an envelope with my name and a key in it. The key wasn't to our place. It was my old flat key, the one I thought I'd lost in first year and got the landlord to replace. I sat on the floor with it in my hand and blood roared in my ears. I could picture the exact day I'd cried because I was sure I was losing my mind about that key. I messaged Ray's mom and asked if she could ask BF's dad where he'd found it. She rang me 10 minutes later sounding like she'd had to sit down and told me he'd found a shoebox under BF's bed with tech stuff and junk and that was in it. She said she had given the box to the police. I put the key in a Ziploc and wrote "old flat key found at BF's 2021 on it with a marker because it felt like I was writing myself back into being real. The police rang that afternoon and said the air tag matched to an Apple ID with BF's initials in it and that he would be questioned about it as part of the existing matters. The constable used the word pattern and again I didn't smile, but inside something lined up that had been skew-whiff for months. They told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing, which was the first time in my life that being a boring person felt like a career. Uni has been quieter than I expected. The student support woman arranged extensions automatically and told my lecturers that I'd be missing tutorials for a bit and that no one would be chasing me for late work. One of my tutors slid a chocolate bar under my printout when he handed it back and didn't say anything, and I ate the entire thing sitting on the grass behind the library, and for the first time in a while my body felt like a person's, not a witness statement. I had a meeting with the campus counselor and told her about the air tag and about how my hands had been practicing flying without me, and we made an agreement that I could walk out of the room if my skin suddenly pretended it didn't fit and that would be allowed. Ray and I have developed a domestic routine that makes no sense given we don't live together. He turns up with a stupid plant he found near a skip and I pretend to be annoyed, and then it lives on the sill like it's always belonged. He knows when I have my worst hour and appears with food like a magician, then disappears before I can feel like a burden. He bought a frying pan that actually works on my little stove because mine was an op-shop find that warped like a cartoon. We talk about nothing and also everything, but we keep careful lines around the part where I could accidentally try to make him my life raft. He is a good man and I am humbler about that than I've ever been about anything. The other night he untangled the fairy lights because I'd put them up so badly the possum had started swatting at them through the window, and then he sat on the floor and told me about some awful shift he had washing dishes in a cafe once and how a guy tried to fry an egg in the milk frother. We laughed in that stupid hiccuping way. I slept 9 hours. There have been odd pockets where BF tries to seep in around the edges through other people. A message from a school friend of his to one of my friends asking if I'd heard he was going to counseling, couched like an update I needed. A cousin of his who sent me a Facebook request with a profile picture of a dog and no posts, and when I didn't accept she messaged Ray asking him to pass on that BF wanted to apologize in person, which made every cell in my body climb the walls. I rang the constable and she told me that if he's using third parties to send messages that still counts, and asked me to send screenshots. When I did, she rang back and said she'd spoken to his lawyer and that any more of that would go straight into a breach report. It is strange to feel like you are a test of whether someone else can be stopped by paper, but each time someone in a uniform says we've got it and then does, a small part of my brain that has been chewing itself calms down. There was one more scare I wasn't expecting. I was in the laundry room at Residences, the one with the lockers and the notice board with a faded poster about free yoga and a lost sock pinned like a little flag, and a guy stuck his head in and said my name in a tone like he knew me, and my whole body lit up like a wire. It was no one. Just a first year who'd recognized me from tutorials and genuinely wanted to know which machine ate coins. I heard myself answer him with my polite voice while my heart hit the concrete. I sat on the floor between the machines for a minute after he left and put my palm flat against the whirring metal and thought it's going to take a while, and that's okay. I took the wet clothes back to my studio and hung them over the chair backs and they dripped into the parquet in little constellations, and I decided to like that. The last thing that's happened is the part that made me realize this is not a forever story. BF pleaded guilty to the breach and copped a fine and a warning from a very tired-looking magistrate about taking orders seriously. There's still the air tag thing being investigated and the VRO is in place for 2 years, which the lady at court said is good and strong. He hasn't been near campus again, and if he tried they'd call me and the police before he got his second foot on the gravel path because the security guy with the soft voice made a point of telling me that. His dad dropped off the last box of my stuff with the RA and it had a little hand mixer in it I forgot I even owned, and Ray used it last night to make meringues badly, and now my kitchen looks like I've been doing plaster work. Ray's mum came by to see the studio and she looked at my fairy lights and the plant, and she stood in the bathroom doorway and said that Possum needs a name, and I said Trevor, immediately, and now apparently I live with Trevor, who judges my dental hygiene, and a cactus lamp that should be illegal. I don't know if this counts as a happy ending. The terrible part of my head keeps trying to write scripts where I bump into BF at a shopping center and we have a neat adult conversation and I hand him a moral and he hands me closure and a refund on 2 years of worry. That's not how people work. What does work is that my door opens and closes when I tell it to, and my phone doesn't chime in the night anymore, and when I cross the courtyard at uni I can see all the way to the library and there aren't any corners that know my name. I bought a small ugly microwave that does the job, and I made my own dinner and ate it sitting on the bed without thinking about whether anyone would have an opinion about it. I still have bad minutes. I had one this afternoon and I texted Ray and said everything feels like syrup, and he sent back a photo of the frying pan with 2 eggs sunny side up that looked like they were plotting something, and underneath he wrote Trevor says hi. I think that's enough for now. I'm going to brush my teeth extravagantly to give the possum a show, and then I'm going to sleep in a room I signed for by myself, under a river of cheap lights, with the kind of quiet you earn. I don't know what happens next exactly, but I believe myself when I say I get to choose it. That's not nothing. It might actually be everything.